how it's really challenging for people to get over their initial spend. And one of the things that we found interesting was that when we looked at Canada's student loan policy, is that Canada does fund their students with a student loan, but it's interest-free as of April 2023. And so let's say that a student borrows $50,000 to go to school. That student only has to pay $50,000. But when we look at a different scenario, someone here in the U.S. could borrow $50,000. Literally a year later, it could look more like 75 because of the way interest compounds. And so we hear a lot of people say, oh, they should just pay their loans. They should. But when interest compounds at a rate unseen, different than a car note, different than a credit card, it makes it really challenging for someone that needs to utilize the student loan system here in the U.S. to be able to afford to repay, plus cost of living and all the other things that we see in the economy. So something I was saying that I would be really interested in seeing with different administrations, I don't know if it'll be this one, it could be the next, we really want to look at other countries and their model as to how they support their students going to college. I think the U.S. has a phenomenal education system, but it is becoming very, very unaffordable. And it is a $1 trillion student loan industry that has a broken faucet. It's hard to repair if we're putting people into debt that is compounding at an enormous rate. So when we hear people say, well, the U.S. should make education free, okay, or it should subsidize their cost, okay. But then we also have to think about the people that are in repayment. What are we going to do to help those folks so that they can get ahead? Our economy is suffering because people are not purchasing homes, land, and investing because they have a student loan the size of a mortgage already. And we know this because we work with people anywhere from $20,000 in student loan debt. I was just telling Laura, we helped someone with $997,000, close to $1 million, just last month. He's a doctor. He's a phenomenal doctor. But if you think about that, Laura, you don't want your surgeon operating, a neurosurgeon operating on you with $1 million in student loan debt. They might be thinking about their student loans and not your brain, right? So we really want to, hope. I know, it's a real thing. So we really want to, we look to our lawmakers and we hope that we create conversations like this so that people can consider what would it look like feasibly to help people get over that debt. But I think Canada is doing a phenomenal job. There were recent changes, as you hear, as of 23, that they said no interest on the loan debt that is owed.
I think some of this as well ties into the work that Sheila does, like when Sheila's working with, couples that are looking at getting married or maybe early in the marital stage. And some of that student loan debt, you talk about your neurosurgeon not wanting to have debt on their mind while they're performing surgery, but the stress that financial situation can cause for couples. So Sheila, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, we address finances as part of the inventory or the relationship tests that couples take because it is very enormous. These young couples are going into a marriage and both of them already have almost a mortgage payment by themselves just in student loan. So how are they going to build a life together in a home? Because that's what everybody wants to do when you start getting married. You want to have a place to live. How can they do that when they already have virtually 2 other mortgages to pay for? So finances is as anybody knows, a big part of marriage. And it can be a very stressful part of marriage if you don't have a handle on it or if you don't see the same goals and finances and the budgeting together. That is a very big challenge for the young couples getting married today.
Mm-hmm. And I can talk about it as well from the trades and technology perspective. So I oversee, which is an interesting model, at a university. I oversee the skilled trades workers. So in Canada, it's considered a red seal, is the degree for skilled trades workers. And it's a different debt portfolio because these are skilled trades workers that are working and then coming to school for a finite period of time to get the next level. And they go through typically 4 levels to get their red seal. So they are working while they are going to school. So the debt portfolio isn't the same. So the funding model through the system is not the same. They get employee, we call it employment insurance or employee insurance, while they're going to school for the 3 to 10 weeks for their skilled trades training. And then they go back on the tools. Similar to a doctor, I often say that skilled trades workers, we think about them as like that blue collar, dirty industry. Every one of your lives in this room is dependent upon the work of a skilled trades worker. You flew in a plane to get here. That's skilled trades.
That's good.
You drive down the road, the electricity in this room, you're trusting that it's not going to be faulty and burn the place down. So again, it's like, lives are dependent upon the work of skilled trades workers, and the last thing you want them to be worried about is debt, is that financial burden. So we've created a system in Canada where you come to school, you get your skilled trade, you go back on the tools, and you earn phenomenal money in the industry before you have to come back for your next level. And it's quite different from a traditional undergraduate. I think we've all had some experience. And who in this room has done undergrad work? Right. So almost everybody in this room, or everybody in this room, has had some sort of educational experience. There's a cost associated with it. You don't want the cost to limit the pathway that you take. So it's different perspectives, very different perspectives of the three panelists sitting on the stage for what we do. And so as the Canadian looking to the Americans and hearing the different models, what do you think, based on what we've talked about so far, and we'll revisit this as we go along, what do you think maybe the US could take away from some of the different perspectives that are out there?
Well, I know for sure interest-free education is something I think thoroughly about. I think there are a couple of things that we were talking about when we were sitting out for breakfast. One of the things I also think that the U.S. is trying to implement with this administration, I was just telling Laura, I think they're doing it wrong, is that there should be a standard of borrowing for the degree you want to study. So, for example, if you wanted to study something like butterflies are very important, but do we need to borrow $250,000 for butterflies? I don't know. Don't kill me. I don't know. And if you have a grievance with it, please just show me why. Give me data. All right. So, and I think that's the other thing. There should be data-driven decisions. One of the things I was telling Laura that's missing is that we're seeing a lot of policy changes, but no data. So when recently the administration that is in office had said, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, they said that certain degrees are no longer going to be funded at a professional level. Did anyone see that? Nursing was one of them. Well, I was very, very concerned about the particular, and I didn't leave you. All my family are teachers. I was coming to you. I was coming over here. Nursing and teaching, let's just stay there. There's already a shortage. So you're telling people that really want to go into, and first of all, that want to go into these fields, let's just stop there. That now there's no money, so what must they do? And then when you think about historically who's going into those fields, they're from marginalized communities. So there isn't a lot of money just sitting around to go be a teacher or to go be a nurse. And then you want them to do a private loan, but then there's subjective borrowing there. I mean, it could go down rabbit holes, I'll stop. So here's the challenge. I don't know when this administration had made that particular announcement, was that wise? Because are we saying we don't need teachers? Are we saying we don't need new nurses? And are we saying that only people from certain communities can go this direction? And then those people may not want to go in that direction. So then who's teaching? And I was just telling Laura, we don't want our neurosurgeon to be learning from YouTube. Well, I hope you don't want your neurosurgeon learning from YouTube. So I think there's bigger conversations that need to be data-driven when we talk about responsible borrowing. And I don't know if, not even just this administration, I want to be very clear. Any administration has taken the time to put a proper group of people in place to research and really look at where our country is headed. When we think about countries like Canada and the US, we think highly of them, I would hope, in certain spaces of education, right? But we're going to see a decline go down when we can't say we compete with the very best and we can't help fund it. So I think we're going to start to see some changes, Laura, over time, that we're not going to be as competitive as other countries.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And we've faced in Canada, you talk about, like marginalized populations. So we had a shift in the funding for our students. We had a decrease in the number of international students that we were permitted to bring into Canada. So the government put in place, I won't bore you with all the details, and I actually don't even know all the details because it's so convoluted. But the government put into place limits on the number of international students that we could bring into the country. At my institution, Kwantlen Polytechnic University, our student population was about 40% international. It's about 38% international. If you're aware of international student funding, they pay about 4 times the domestic rate. So the funding that we receive from the government to fund domestic students it needs to be supplemented. The system that we have created is that it needs to be supplemented by international students. And a lot of those international students go into business, go into nursing. Like, these are strong programs that we have at the institution. And now those student populations are not there because the limits that have been put in place. So we now have reductions in the student numbers because of student funding for those key areas that we need supports in the system. Like the US, we're facing reductions in numbers of nurses, reductions in numbers of teachers. We have an area in the Lower Mainland where there were not enough teachers, so they pulled all of the educational assistants to become teachers. So they were on a letter of permission to teach. So your children, who in this room has children? I have to put my hand down because I don't. So your children were not being taught by skilled teachers. They were instead being taught by educational assistants that were really focused on, educational assistants are more focused on students that have learning disabilities or differently abled students. They're now primarily responsible for your student learning. Not necessarily a bad thing, but not the career path that they chose. And again, it's this funding model that's created these disparities and are directing students in directions that they don't necessarily want to go, but they have to go because they don't want to get into phenomenal debt. So Sheila, you probably experienced that in like some of the conversations that you spearhead.
We do, and based on some of that conversation, we are actually in the middle of developing some new relationship tests to specialize in what we call first responders. Those would be the nurses, the doctors, the firemen, the policemen, the emergency, because of the special stress that they're under. And part of that is the financial stress. It's also the stress and the trauma based on that job. You know, you come on an accident and you know, it's a gruesome accident. You know, how do you take that home and deal with the spouse on that? Or what if both of them are first responders? How are they handling the trauma and the stress? And part of that is the finances go along with that. So you've got all this stress piling up on top of each other. So how are they handling their marriage? How is their marriage being strengthened and not pulled apart by all the stress and all the external influences that's going on in their life? So we're in the middle of developing, like I said, what I call first responder relationship inventories to help address some of those needs.
And Sheila, Sonia, pardon me, you had talked about earlier today, we had chatted about like some of the populations that you're wanting to support from different regions of the world. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're seeing just such a surge of different populations here in the U.S. that need support with student loan repayment. So I think that one of the things that we have to know is that there are still a lot of first-time college goers that are being supported by different populations. Let me give you a good example. So something I didn't realize until more recent is that we have a huge community of Spanish-speaking parents that need support. But that wasn't on my radar at first because you'll think about, well, their child speaks English, right? And they're with the primary debt. But then there's a lot of parents that have Parent Plus loans. And if anybody knows about a Parent Plus loan, it is not, it's not friendly. And so,
sorry, can I pause you for a sec? So for somebody that does not know
what okay, I've got time for that. Yeah. So a Parent Plus loan is a federal loan that is given by the government with an enormous interest rate, close to 8%. And they've made it to where you cannot repay on it while your child is in school, but it's still accruing interest.
Wow.
So you almost want to pay while the child's in school, right? It's everybody like, woof, I know, right? So what's happening is we were meeting more recently a lot of parents who are not speaking English as their primary language and said they needed support. They don't know what they signed. They don't know how to pay this bill. They don't know what to do next. They just wanted their child to be able to go to school as any parent would. But even when you think about just traditionally taking out a student loan, has anybody ever read their promissory note, all 30 pages? No, you just sign and went. And you probably didn't even do exit counseling, or you might have not even been required, depending on when you graduated, to do exit counseling on your student loans. So we're seeing a lot of parents have questions around, what do I do with this? Why do I have to pay this? Why is it so much? Because again, remember what I just said, the student loan could have been $5,000. Now, little Bobby's in school 2 years later is at 10. How do we get here? Because of the interest compounding. So we're wanting to create support for different language models to be able, I feel like if they had enough education and understanding early on, they could be able to tackle repayment a little better. But also, and this is not the space today, but what are the alternatives, even for those parents or students, to not have to use a student loan? And are they inclusive in that conversation?
Yeah. I think you raised an important, I mean, everything that you just said was important, so don't get me wrong. But in the middle of that, you said something that really I want to talk about, and that's what we sign without thinking about what we're signing. Sorry, oh yes, exactly. So as a dean, I often have to go into classrooms and have really difficult conversations with students. Let me rephrase that. I go into classroom, I get the student, and I bring them to my office to have a really difficult conversation.
Yeah.
And the conversation is often, when you went and applied to the university to come into skilled trades training or to any aspect of the institution, you went through this multi-page document, and that document has unbelievable legalities in it. Your roles and your responsibilities as a student in the institution, your responsibilities to know policies and procedures, your responsibilities for the debts you incur. Sometimes those debts are related to tuition, but sometimes it's when you borrow a book from the library and you don't return it on time. Hard to believe that in this day and age we still have books in libraries, but we do. So we put students in this position where, you know, your age of majority, so you can sign and commit to things that you don't even know what you're committing to because you don't necessarily understand the long-term impacts. And you face those impacts throughout your education, but unfortunately you also face those impacts once your education is finished. And it carries with you, you know, talking about the neurosurgeon with almost $1 million worth of debt, you know, and again, Sheila, the conversations that you must navigate with people that made these decisions early on when it's, all I want to do is become a marine biologist, because that was my dream as a kid, was I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I have no idea how I became a dean, but here we are. But I applied for college, and my mom worked at a college, my dad was a teacher, and they said, yeah, I've got a history of post-secondary education. Let's get you in there. So I signed up for things. Early on in my education, I took out a student loan. I will admit that I used that student loan to go traveling. Not proud of that one, proud of the travel that I did. But eventually it came back to haunt me because I had this debt that I had forgotten about, because I thought, free money as a 19-year-old student that gets to go to Greece using that student loan because my parents paid my tuition for me. So we kind of don't think sometimes about the supports that we have in place for people coming into higher education that are making these commitments with government, with private institutions, and how the long-term residual impact of those. So Sheila, do you want to talk about that from your perspective, and then we'll hand it over to Sonia?
And that it exactly gets into it, the long-term impact. When you borrowed that money to go to Greece, you probably didn't think about, if you got married down the road, what's that going to do to your marriage? What are you bringing into your marriage? You know, you may have had the, I don't know, say 20,000 in that, but what if your spouse has another 20,000? You're already into 40,000 at that point, and then the wedding. You know, you're going to borrow probably for that wedding too. Finances, it has such a big impact on marriage that people don't realize when they're at the time they're just wanting to go to Greece, and they're not thinking about what down the road that impact has, because they don't really maybe understand what they did or got into it, or the interest that they're going to be paying. That 20,000 is now 40. How do they pay that back? Want to start a family, start a marriage, have the American dream of that, and how do they go about doing that when their handcuffs are already on? So how do they go about doing that? And that's a hard conversation. I don't know what the right answer to that is, but each couple needs to figure out what that answer is and face it head on. It's all about conversation, and they need to have that conversation up front, knowing what they're getting into, because maybe the future spouse of the neurosurgeon doesn't want to go in walking into the $1 million worth of debt that they're probably not going to see, themselves out of probably until retirement or more. So maybe they need to know that up front, and maybe that's something they're not willing to take on.
Just context for his name is John. He's watching. How did he get close to $1 million? Is that he is a parent of what we call in the sticky middle. And so the parent doesn't have enough money to be able to pay for their education for their child in full, but they don't make money to where they can get a full grant either, right?
Yeah.
So we see a lot of our parents here in this economy and what we call the sticky middle. The government says you're not poor enough, but you're not rich enough to self-pay. And then he also lost his wife. So he had to take on Parent Plus loans for 2 children that also wanted to be doctors. So we've got a family of doctors, right? And he wanted to absorb the debt so they didn't have to, which actually worked in his favor. So now they're all debt free because he was able to get forgiven through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. But until he had consulted with us and connected, because he was so in a headspace about it, he was paying $5,000 a month.
Wow.
And one of the things he had said to our team members was that he said, I would love to, remarry, but who was going to take me with $1 million?
That's it, right?
Well, I didn't know Sheila then. I said, I'll send him over to Sheila, But so now he might be out in the world dating. We have to do a follow-up. I'll call you guys back next year. So this is really exciting for him, because what I was hearing him say was that he was just functioning through life, like probably in real-time depression in a sense about that number. But he also felt very proud that they were doctors, and that his children didn't have the debt.
Right.
But when you look at him on paper, you would almost say like that he failed. But he didn't fail. The system failed him and his children. So now he's a very happy man. I know he's happy because I was telling Laura, he sent us an exuberant amount of money for lunch because we're very affordable. So I was like, what am I going to do with this? He was like, go eat some steak or something. I'm like, you don't got to tell me twice, John. So, but it's just an example of, no, we don't know who he would marry with $1 million if he's being transparent. And I'll tell you something, and then we could definitely take some questions. Yeah. Most people are not telling their spouse ahead of time what their debt is.
Correct.
True debt.
Correct.
You don't find out until it's time to go get a mortgage. And that's really what comes out. I mean, you don't need to tell somebody about a car or credit card, but a mortgage, everything. Anybody ever go to get a mortgage before or pre-approval? Mm-hmm. Everything is on the line. Yeah. And he probably knew ahead of time to not put someone in that situation, because that would be maybe an annulment. So we don't know.
Yeah, quick.
Yeah. So I saw your hand raised. Yeah. And Sheila, did you want to add something?
No, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But now all of a sudden we got more than 9%. More than 90% of the population is online now.
They're staying.
And we've shrunk the number of locations that we have by over 50%. But I'm not going to say which university I work for, but I will say that as we went online, we also added a number of students in the classroom that each professor teaches. Mm-hmm. And, and there's many of us can work from home now as well. So there's some positive things. And the technology is really good. I think the education is good. We do have live lessons, but I think that should be a way for the universities to cut costs, because it doesn't cost them as much money to have a student online as it does to have them on campus and using the facilities. And they can shrink down the size of the facilities. So I was wondering if Canada is going through some of the same issues. That's one question. Okay. And then I have 2 other quick ones. I was wondering about AI in Canada, how you guys are embracing that, because it was on hold for a long time, but now we want to put AI in everything. Mm-hmm. And then I forgot what my third question was.
Let's do the first one.
Okay, we'll do the first 2, and then we'll pop over here because I see a question there, and then we'll come back. So to your first question, I mean, we, like the rest of the world, we were quite responsive or reactive to the COVID-19 pandemic. At my institution, we instantly shut down. But I will say my portfolio, so again, skilled trades, kind of like a neurosurgeon that you don't want to learn from AI. Skilled trades, I don't think that you want somebody working on your car brakes that learned off of YouTube. So my portfolio, we were back up and running 3 weeks after the pandemic hit. The government put into place a lot of restrictions on us. So it was like mask wearing. I forget, we went from social distancing to physical distancing. We had to correct our terminology because we didn't want people to be socially distanced. We just wanted them to be physically distanced. But we do have a lot of areas at my institution that continue to run online programs and run them quite successfully. We're in the process of mothballing one of our campuses and areas. So I have 5 campuses in my institution. One of them is being mothballed. And then the other 4, mine runs actually growing capacity. I had about 1,600 students in my portfolio when the pandemic hit. Now I'm hitting about 2,200. So I'm actually growing, but other areas in the institution, because of that shift to online learning, they have continued to do online learning. Collective agreement restrictions, so all of our employees are unionized, and they have limits in the collective agreement for the number of students that can be in their classes. So even though it's online, we as administrators cannot add more students in. Fortunately, unfortunately, I think it would be good for the institution from a revenue. I'm sorry? Not necessarily. There are private institutions that are not necessarily unionized, but all of the public institutions are. Not the same unions. Mine's called the Kwantlen Faculty Association, and then we have the British Columbia General Employees Union, I think it is, for the staff. When it comes to AI, so talking about the bridge between online learning to AI, at my institution, we have a teaching and learning portfolio, phenomenal. It's led by a woman named Dr. Leanne Waddington. And what they're trying to do is find different ways to assess students so that artificial intelligence is not negatively impacting learning. As an example, if you're doing an online exam and it's a multiple choice, you can just go to AI, look up the answer on the side, get your answer, plug it in. You can even say, write me an essay that covers this topic and make it sound like a second-year student. And a professor, if you know how to use AI, as somebody that's right now about to defend her doctorate, if you know how to use AI, you can make it sound exactly like your voice. I know profs think that they can figure it out all the time. I hate to tell you. But I think a real responsibility for us as educators is recognizing AI is not going to go away. We need to embrace it. In conversation this morning, Sonia pulled up Alex, who's our AI friend, and asked some questions and got immediate answers. It's our responsibility as educators to adjust and recognize that the upcoming generation is using it without question. So how do we safely incorporate it to maintain the integrity of the work that we do that we're so proud of? So I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Well, I just wanted to ask you, and please don't say which university. Do you work for a for-profit or a not-for-profit? I knew you did. So my background is that I worked for a for-profit institution for many years before I created my own business, Student Loan Doctor, which actually drove me to creating this business because I was meeting students that are adult learners. So all of my education is around education, curriculum, and adult learning. And what I was studying is how does student loan debt affect African-American women? But from an adult learning perspective, I was seeing people in real time having to answer the question of how they want to pay that debt when they left our institution. So I already knew when you asked your question, I was like, he works for a-for-profit. Now, what I just want to say that I've seen on this end with repayment, a couple of things. There have been more borrowers' defense applications submitted to the Department of Education because of the pandemic shift. People started filing complaints with the Department of Education saying, I went to this institution, mostly were for profit, that they failed to honor what they said I was going to get coming in because of the shift to online learning. So I just wanted to give you that perspective that there are tons of applications that probably will not get read thoroughly, and that we just saw as of 2 weeks ago, the DOE discharged over 100,000 people student loan debt because of their complaint. So if they went to, I don't want to say said school, well, I can say because it's public knowledge, like a DeVry or a Phoenix, if you put a complaint in at a certain time, your student loan could have got wiped clear because you could have made a good defense that your education wasn't what you initially signed up for. And there was a lot of this around the pandemic changes. So that's a perspective you didn't ask for, but there are students that are now saying that their education they believe was impacted, or their dean got let go, and that actually happened to me in the middle of my process. Like I was working so closely with one of my deans, and then I'm like, where is he? And they said, oh, he transitioned. No, you transitioned him. It was such a big thing. So we're seeing it impact our students and then staff. I thought you said something that was really, really interesting. And I didn't want you to go over it. I always had wondered, did the staff's salary increase with all of these changes to online? Or if it didn't increase, why did cost of education still go up? Because now we're not having to pay a light bill. So no, you're not in wrong thinking. I mean, we could talk all day about that conversation. But I think that it's a bigger conversation to have, that we're still acting like these expenses are, and they're not. So where did this money go? You know, and then why couldn't we give it either to staff or students? So I just wanted to chime in that I think that your brain is in the right direction. I don't know if we all have the answers here, but if you can call me when you get some.
So I'm going to.
Okay, well, I just want to talk about two things, get your opinions on two things that have happened in Texas over the last, I would say, 4 years. Every university was challenged to come up with a $10,000 four-year degree, and they have done that. And then so what is your thought about that? It sounds good, right? But then my second question is, I think what part of the issue is, take the doctor, the neurosurgeon. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody wants to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. And what you put in for the education, you need to know, will you really get that back out? And we need to know that for every position, right, or degree program that we're going to offer. Like if I had to do over again, I would be a HVAC because I would be a millionaires right now.
Mm-hmm. Would.
But nobody told me that, and my mother was not educated, and she said, you need to go to college. And I go, yes, ma'am. Anyway, so what are your thoughts on a $10,000 degree? And, you know, my question is, well, will they get a job with that, or what kind of job would they get? I can't answer that for you because they're all different, but anyway.
So thank you for the question. I am conscious of the lovely individual behind you that's telling us that we are out of time. It's amazing to me that the time passes so quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We are around, I believe, for the rest of the day, or at least for the morning. So if we want to have a conversation directly, I will quickly say I love the direction, the concept of a $10,000 degree. Unfortunately, it's not possible with collective agreements that I have at my institution. We would have to union bust, and that unfortunately is not a possibility. But if you, but if you ever want to look at HVAC, come talk to me because I can hook you up.
Yeah. I was just end on saying that we have a saying around here that goes, borrowing determination should equal career compensation. And so we're asking our students and our parents that before you borrow, does this career equal out? Is it a good return on investment? So I love your question and statement. And I think if more parents and students led with that thought, then we would see wiser borrowers.
Sheila, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, if any of you guys have your kids wanting to get married, send them to FOCCUS's way. We will help have the conversation between them and their future spouse before they get married, so that some of these items get disclosed before marriage.
So I see a final question, and unfortunately we are being told that we have a hard stop right now. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately I have to respect the panel that we have here and their time. So but we are around to chat with you directly. So thank you very much.